Broadcasting from Oklahoma, the tornado capital of the world, home of the Oklahoma City Thunder and the University of Oklahoma Sooners. This is the Curated Experience Show, a weekly podcast about the customer experience with viewpoints you will not hear anywhere else. And now your host, author, and customer experience expert, Amos Tanuma.
Welcome to the Curated Experience. I am your host, Amos Tanuma.
And I am super excited today. I have a guest on with me. It's Krister Ungebach. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did.
Good morning, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today. It's really my pleasure. You've been a CEO, and you've founded your companies. You've been an entrepreneur. You've worked in corporate America. You've got an interesting story in that I was listening to snippets of it, and you'd had one of these fast growing companies, something like 3,000% growth,
Yeah.
on top, and then you walked away and got into this business of helping leaders. So say a little bit about that, so that the our audience gets a sense of where you come from on this topic.
Yeah, so the quick story: after building a company to hundreds of employees in 8 countries, I found myself at the YMCA signing up for a gym membership, and a woman asked me the question, "Who's your emergency contact?" And I broke down crying because in that moment I had no one. In the weeks before, I had walked away from my job as a CEO of the company I'd helped build and love, and at this very same time, 2 weeks later, my wife walked out on me, and so I looked in the mirror and saw that I was a leader with no followers. And I had started reading business books when I was like 12 years old. I had read hundreds of business books before I even kind of, hit college. Sometimes more business books than some people read an entire lifetime. And I went on a 4-year journey looking outside of the business world for what are the leadership and communication insights that I'd missed. And I was really looking for something that was more of a universal communication and leadership language that works equally well in the office as well as with children and in relationships. And that was ultimately what I discovered over the course of 4 years, and I call it the talk shifts. So tools to transform leadership in business and partnership and in life.
Awesome. Well, I am excited to have this conversation with you. And for those of you who have listened to us over the years, we focus primarily on what we call this constituent experience, which is your customer experience, your employee experience, shareholders, et cetera. So I can't think of a more relevant topic to this. So I want to start by this talk shift concept to get folks to sort of relax. So one of the things I found really interesting about this was that I was expecting something overly complex, right?
Yeah.
And I was struck and frankly encouraged by the fact that it doesn't require. There wasn't. I didn't see a CRM software it told me to download. Like there wasn't a whole language I want to learn. But I want you to talk a little bit about, why is this seemingly simple thing? Where does its power come from? Like on the surface, it seems not overly dramatic. But from what I've seen and some of the results you have, it seems like it's a game changer.
Well, so yeah, part of the story behind is I had to learn to lead in 2 foreign languages as an adult. I moved after September 11th. I moved to France to open businesses in France and Germany. So language has always been a big kind of top of mind for me as an adult. Right. And when I realized that as a leader and a CEO, my heart was in the right place, but my words were not. And so what I realized is after this journey is that there were really subtle nuances, small changes. I call them little language changes that make a big difference. That, think of like emotional intelligence or how we lead people to their solutions, not ours, which certainly is important in a customer service setting because we're typically solving people's problems all day. And it's hard to, as a leader, to kind of go out of that mode. And so for me, I'm an engineer, I'm a man, I want a recipe, like say it this way, right? And so the talk shifts are really, fill in the blanks phrases and scripts that you can use almost like training wheels while you're trying to develop this new level of kind of emotional connection and driving all in commitment from employees. And then people, after you kind of use these scripts and these kind of fill in the blanks phrases, it becomes more natural. So that was really what I intended to create, is something that was simple enough that I could have learned it and practiced it fairly simply.
That's awesome. So I want to give you two common scenarios, and our listeners will really appreciate this. So, when you think about our customer experience and specifically customer service interactions, I tend to think there are two kinds of outcomes after every interaction, and there may be more, but let me boil it down to two. So there's the one where you had a service issue and I was able to solve it. And believe it or not, there's friction in those interactions.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a second kind of interaction, which is you are contacting me and I can't give you exactly what you want, right? Like for whatever the reasons are, like your service is down and I cannot fix it this second. Like I want you to start with that one first. So if you're listening and you lead a team and every morning, every day you have to coach your teams, your managers, your what have you, and your frontline folks on how to, take these negative experiences for customers. They're contacting you to get it resolved. Sometimes you can give them exactly what they want. Sometimes you just can't, but you want to leave them in a good place. I find that these scenarios is where a lot of our audience tend to get stuck as a leader. How do I encourage this person to continue to do that job better?
Well, I think that in a service setting, so talk shift number 22 is about apology. And it's
yes, plenty of that.
Say sorry less and apologize more. And the difference is, I think we say sorry a lot, but we don't really apologize. I had a funny story. I was in Germany and I was riding my bike and I bumped into this old man and I was speaking English. I said sorry, and by the time he heard, and then I said, I remember the German word, which is tut mir leid. And by the time I got that out of my mouth, he was like 50 feet away. He didn't hear me, right? So on one side I said apology, but it was in a language he didn't understand because he was an elderly German man. But then when I did finally say it, it wasn't heard, right? So, and I think that this is really a great metaphor for what happens in business and in relationships at work and at home all the time. And so when we apologize, interestingly in German, the word tut mir leid is literally translated as it causes me suffering. And so there's a subtle difference between saying sorry and I apologize. But then I think that there's different elements in a business apology. It's one, accepting full responsibility, saying we take full responsibility for this problem, and then saying, here's what I'm doing to make sure it doesn't happen again. And then the next element is, if you're open to this, saying, what can I do to make it right? I may not be able to do what you're asking. If you're asking for a year, refund or something like that, I may be able, but putting the customer in control and say, do you have any ideas of what you would like me to do to make it right? If it's a situation where you think the customer is going to say so, but so putting them in a little bit in control and giving them a little bit of control over how it will be made right can be, and then the last part is just understanding, recognizing, I understand. I think in any customer service training, you would learn to I understand this is making an impact on your business or your job or your stress or whatever it may be.
Wow.
Now, if you take the last step and apply it in a personal relationship, or even between a leader and an employee, this is less relevant in a customer service example. But the last step is to say, will you forgive me? Because the challenge that we have is that we often apologize, but we never get the end result of the other person actually forgiving us. So the resentment is still carried forward. And so specifically, having the conversation and recognizing that a lot of times people say, yeah, forgiven, no, it's all in the past, but they have not actually forgiven the infraction.
Yeah. So stay there with me for a moment, because what I want to dive into is one of by far the biggest challenges that people in service deal with is employee turnover. I had a guest on, it was probably a couple of months ago. They have this kind of unique fast food experience, and they have virtually zero turnover. And a lot of our audience were super interested in that. Do you have any thoughts? I've heard all the cliches of the people lead leaders. I have my doubts about that. Most service organizations tend to have really high turnover, and the person who gets the brunt of that tends to be the leaders, which makes sense, which is it's costing the company money. Any thoughts on how we can sort of apply some of this to that?
Well, this was really one of the reasons why I went for this kind of how can I find a unified language that works across business and kind of family life? Because family life is, and many leaders and researchers will say these are two totally different things, because family life is about creating emotional connection. Well, the reality is I had an interesting conversation through a lot of my research. I ended up in a lot of strange workshops with like a lot of marriage therapists. And I asked a marriage therapist, so like, what are the things that women say on your couch over and over and over again over the 30 years as a marriage therapist? And the interesting thing that I found is she told me the 4 or 5 phrases, and 4 out of these 5 phrases were the same words that an employee would say when they're unhappy in a job. Like, about their boss, right? My boss, all he cares about is the work. He doesn't listen to me. He doesn't take my opinion. These are the things that wives say over and over and over again on marriage accounts. So that what part of the talk shifts is one of the fundamental premises is the things that make happier employees also make happier wives. Wow. And so here's the thing. I agree with you. Like the thing that in the customer service, if you're in a low pay, if you have employees who are making a low wage, right? If they can get a job for 20% more,
sure,
they're going to take it, right? Yep. And in fact, if they're at a lower wage range, maybe it only takes 10% more. If that's going to be the difference between kind of having a nicer apartment or something for the children or whatever. So but if you take that out. And we used to find, I ran a software company where our thought was, and generally held true, is that people will stay in an organization if they work for a leader that they love or a company that they love, as long as the compensation they're being offered is less than 20% more. Yep. So that's really what we're striving for. And the reality is if somebody gets paid double or whatever, they're going to leave, right? So as a leader. One of the things I found is one of the things we were successful as, and probably one of my biggest realizations is that when we were CEO and we grew this company to hundreds of employees, people were following the vision, like my vision of what we were going to do. But I realized that they weren't following me. And so the leaders who truly get the most success are the ones who, people want to follow and have a vision that people want to follow, right? You can be one or the other. Sometimes you don't have a vision, but people follow you because they really enjoy and they're inspired just by your presence and your personality and your caring. Or you can have a vision, but if you really want to achieve remarkable results, it's best to have both.
I couldn't agree more. I want you to get in a little bit of. I like to leave people in where do you start? So I'm just hearing about TalkShift and this idea of the power of communication, both from a leadership perspective, but also arming your employees as they deal with customers and internal employees and shareholders, etc. But if I'm listening to this and going like, man, where should I start? Where do you typically tell people who are like, man, this sounds good, but how do I get started?
So the best is to go to talkshift.com/quiz, and we have a quiz. We've got over 150,000 data points so far. And the interesting thing is we can predict based upon your responses about your communication, not about the other person's communication, about your communication. We can predict with a reasonable degree of accuracy whether you have a frustrating relationship in your life, and that could be at work or at home. So the interesting thing is if we're able to predict based upon your words whether you have a frustrating relationship, the outcome of that, what that means is that we can have more hope that we can actually change some of those frustrating relationships because maybe it's more about our words than it is about theirs. And so after you take the quiz, you'll be directed to a web page. You can get some free sample chapters, or you can actually get like the shortcut guide of just the key chapters for improving a relationship in a marriage or with a child or with somebody at work. It's called the Jumpstart Guide. And so that's the easiest and fastest way to get started. When the book launches in October, obviously you can get the book. There's going to be a video book and audio book with kind of exclusive interview footage that I filmed of some of the most common questions that people ask while reading the book.
That's awesome, and I must leave it there. I want to thank you so much for joining us. We're going to put your information out and your website and social media channels so folks can go connect with you directly. I really appreciate you doing this, and we will talk soon. Thanks so much for coming on.
Great. Take care.
And until next time, remember, the experience is either random or intentionally curated. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Curated Experience with Amas Tanuma. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll join the conversation online by visiting us at curatedcx.com or at amastanuma.com. That's curatedcx.com or amastenumah.com. And please invite your friends and colleagues to visit our website or iTunes, where they can check this and previous podcasts. This has been a Bien LLC production. Check us next time for another edition of The Curated Experience.